Welcome to the Level Up Your Band podcast, episode 67. Hello and welcome back to the Level Up Your Band podcast. My name is Gavin Patterson and I'm here with Julian Pombo.
Hi.
Hi. So, today we've got another interview. It's been a while. It's been like...
It has been.
15 episodes or something since the last one. Probably more. Maybe the first one this year. Is it the first one this year? I think it is.
Yes. Yes, I think it is, because I'm trying to remember. I was either Graham.
I think it was Graham.
Was the first one this year, or it was like the last one last year. I don't know, man. Like, time's an illusion.
So yeah. This week we're going to be interviewing Aileen Sweeney and Ben Eames from another podcast called the Ear to the Ground podcast. So it's a joining of podcasts. It's podcast day. Podcast. I can say podcast 10 more times if you want. So their podcast focuses around music composition, sort of songwriting. So they interview lots of composers from all different genres, and they quiz them on their techniques and like how they compose. Who they compose with, all that good stuff. They go really technical as well, a little bit too technical for me.
It's a bit geeky, yeah.
It's very geeky. It's great if you love all that, like getting right into the technical composition stuff. Then it's definitely a podcast for you. You should go and check them out. That's the Ear to the Ground podcast. So go and give them a wee follow. And they're both musicians and composers themselves as well. And Aileen, I've known Aileen for... Aileen, I've known Aileen for 10 years. And Aileen and Julian and I are all in the same band together.
Yeah.
So yeah, without further ado, I give you Aileen and Ben. Thanks for coming on.
Ta-da!
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so how's your podcast doing? You must be how many episodes in now?
I think we're just about to release our 8th. We only do one a month.
Right.
So there's not, they don't come out as frequently, but we do go into quite sort of nitty gritty topics, which take quite a long time to research and... You're heavy on the editing stuff. Like you bring in like sound clips and images and graphics and stuff, which we don't do. We're so lazy. I don't. Ben does.
That's where my responsibility really goes up. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of editing. It takes us maybe sometimes 3 or 4 nights to edit it, and then we send it to Ben's sister to make it sound pretty and shiny, and that takes a couple of days. It's pretty much constantly ongoing, and then we release one episode.
Right.
Pretty much.
Because it's quite like I've watched some of the things you put out, and I'm glad I'm not editing it. It's just it looks so complicated, just with like trying to find, say if you're referencing, which I think is really cool, if you're referencing like bits and songs of the guests, the guest song, you have to actually find the bit of the song you're talking about and fade it in, and oh no.
That bit is, because for example we were talking to composer Martin Suckling, who just released a whole album, and one of the pieces on that album was like 20 minutes long, and he was talking very specifically about one cymbal hit. And you're just like trawling through like 20 minutes to try and find that bit.
We were fortunate with that one in that he'd given us, or we could access the score. And there was a point in music where he'd scored it for Metal Objects.
Yeah.
So we basically scrolled through the score looking for this one moment where there's like quite a significant amount of metal objects.
Metal springs.
And then found it and then managed to drop it in just at the right moment, which was quite nice. And
it was quite satisfying.
There was a really like sort of serendipitous like end of the clip where he drops all of his like own metal objects, which he's demonstrating with.
Yeah.
So we could fade in the orchestra as he's showing us, and then it all kind of dropped off. It's quite good.
Jeez. So, I wanted to get you on because the songwriting, composition in general I've never been able to get into it at all, and I don't know anything about it. Julian is a pretty decent songwriter, and he's doing it all the time. So he you know, it's on my end, it's just I just cannot. I don't know if it's something to do with me or I think it's a little bit of both. Maybe lack of interest or lack of talent. It might be like my lack of talent makes me uninterested in trying to pursue it. But it always baffles me how they do it. Because I'm like a producer at heart. I have to work with someone else's thing. Like someone comes in and has their song already done, and I can edit, but I can't create the initial thing. And it annoys me, and I just get so annoyed at people who are good at doing that. So
I think it's like any skill. Like Gavin, you know me well with my sort of technological abilities. They are lack of, yeah. And like I can get by. I can record myself doing X, Y, and Z, and I can get by, but I don't enjoy it. But that's because of the difficulties I face, because I haven't spent enough time, and I don't care enough because I have people like Gavin in my life to So you have to get over that hump. You have to get over that hurdle, and it's just a case of. I mean, it might take. Some people might find it easier than others, and it might take people an hour. Well, it wouldn't, but it might take people a year to get over that hump. Or it might take people 5 years to go over that hump, and I guess that's how I think of it anyway. I don't know if you, if anyone agrees or disagrees.
It's almost like the idea of like kind of discipline is more important than just being able to just do it right out of the gate. So it's better to get into what's the word?
Routine.
Just into a routine of just constantly doing it, even if you are, even if you think you're not doing so well at it. It's just a constant act of doing it over and over and over.
I guess the thing that's like that's tricky about it, that like I'm just comparing it to sort of sound engineering, Gavin, because that's your bag. But like if you're stuck, there is a right answer. I'm putting in inverted commas. Like if you can't get something to work, you can go on YouTube and find it, or you can phone a friend. Like you can. Whereas when you're writing something, there's no right answer because you have to provide the answer. And it's just a case of sticking it out long enough. I always think of it as like if you're carving, I don't know if a statue, like if you have a stone statue, you've got a big block of stone. Like you just have to keep chipping away, and there'll be that point where you're like, it doesn't look like what I want it to look like. I want this to look like a perfect Greek sculpture. And it's just not going to look like that. And I think that's the point where people stop, where they can't see the end result. They can't see where they want it. They kind of have this hazy idea in their head of what they want it to be, and they just can't. And that's the point where I think people give up, and you just have to keep going. And I think once the answer shows itself to you, that oh gosh, I sound like such a airhead. But once you've solved the problem, you're like, yes, and then you just like go on and sometimes the problem can be in front of you for like weeks, months,
right? Yeah,
and then there's just that moment.
So sometimes you just come totally on it you come across the answer completely by accident.
Totally,
This happened to me last night. So I've been scoring a student film over the past couple of months, and there was a bit at the end. We were struggling with the music at the credits of all things. And what had happened was I said to him, right, I've made these changes, blah, 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 blah. I mixed down exported the video and stuff just to show him. But Cubase, for some reason, didn't render the music at the end. I think it was something to do with me. It's not the program. It was my fault. But then so it just gets to the credits and then there's nothing. And he was just like, "Oh, is there supposed to be nothing?" I was like, "No, there's supposed to be stuff going on there." He's like, "I kind of like that though. I kind of like that. It's just empty." And then we were like, "Actually, you're right. It's a lot better." So yeah, sometimes it's just complete accident.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Right.
And I'm making it sound like it's this pained artiste. It doesn't always need to be difficult. I'm just saying that, a lot of the time you can think, this is too hard.
Yeah.
I give up. I can't do it. And,
yeah,
you do need to sort of have that breakthrough. I mean, you've been toiling away on your sort of EP for about a year, Ben.
Yeah. I suppose my method of writing music is write something and then leave it for about a year and then come back to it. And by the time I'm in my 70s, I'll definitely have at least like an album's worth of stuff.
Can't wait for that. It'll be a good album.
Yeah. No, I think there's also something to be said for if you can't get past something. Sometimes it is like completely valid to just move on to something else, so that you give that thing space to like grow by itself.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the answer is really simple, but because you've been looking at it so closely, you don't see what the answer is to sort of solving that problem.
It's basically problem solving. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think also running ideas past people, like I'm like 90% of the time I'm stuck. I'm always stuck, and I'll ask Ben, like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And he'll say, I think you should do this. This would be a really great idea. And I go, oh gosh, no, that's an awful idea. But in him saying that makes me know what I don't want to do. So that eliminates 50 possibilities. Yeah. You know what I mean? So sometimes, even if someone doesn't have the answer, it can give you your not answer.
Yeah,
that makes
we did an
sense,
episode. It's a couple of weeks ago. I actually edited it yesterday. It'll be coming out as of recording this in 2 days' time, and it's an absolute doozy. It's a songwriter. He releases songs on his own, but it's like on behalf of a band kind of thing. And he sent it off to this production company, and they critiqued it. You should listen to the episode because it's absolutely hilarious.
It's hilarious.
Just this,
I lose it live on camera because I couldn't believe it.
This email that this guy gets is it's shocking. It's really bad. Like just with basically them saying like, we really like your song, except it's terrible, and they give you like a full page of like things that they want to change before they'll allow you to put your song on their platform.
Wow.
And we were talking about like negative and positive criticism and stuff, and you're kind of talking about that. But yeah, I guess my question comes because I don't know, I've tried songwriting in the past, and it's not just songwriting for me. It's creating art in general. I've never found it easy. I see some other people that it just comes naturally, and it's been hard for me, and I've just decided not to bother. I prefer working on other people's stuff. Like, would you say that the ability to write a song or create something original is it a learned thing or is it a genetic thing? Because just through like playing drums, for example, drums are probably the most obvious example of this in terms of musical instruments, because you can learn to play the piano and be very crap at music. You can learn to play the piano and get by, but you can't, if you have no rhythm, you can't play drums. It's impossible. But if you don't have any rhythm, you can play piano and you can play guitar.
Actually, that's a good point. I'm thinking back to uni.
Genuinely,
and I'm like,
I'm just going back to high school. The first time I ever sat down at a drum kit, I could play it. The first time. It just was like that. But I got through school, got to 6th year, and I remember there was this little module in class, and we, as 6th years, had to take a class, like actually hold the class. So first years would come in, 12, 13-year-olds, and we would take the class. It would be my turn this week and someone else's turn next week. And I was taking drummers. And it just so happened my wee cousin was in the same school as me. He was in first year when I was in 6th year. And we were doing the drum segment where everyone gets a shot at the drums. So they thought, we'll let Gavin do it because he plays drums. So fine. And the kids are all coming up. And my cousin comes up. And I didn't know if he had any musical ability at all. I mean, he might because he's related to me and I'm into music. So, but he sits down, right, and I'm like, okay, right, just like all the other students, like, just tap out this wee beat. And he couldn't hold any rhythm at all on any limb at any point at all, ever.
Poor cousin.
Kind of like my dad. My dad's the same. He's just completely rhythmless. And there is no amount of training could ever get him to play the drums competently because it's just not in there. Would you say it's the same for songwriting or creation in general, or is it different?
Well, that's a hard question. You said there was no hard questions, Gavin.
What I'm saying is, I might not have it. Do you know what I mean?
I'll let you go first. I do have some thoughts on this, but I'll let you go first, Aileen.
Well, gosh, I don't know what to say. I kind of disagree with you, Gavin. No one, contrary to people's sort of romanticised opinions about the arts, no one comes out of the womb playing the drums. And the reason is because you haven't yet learned to move your limbs. Like, you have to learn to be able to move your body. Like, you have to learn that. And drums is an extension of that. And of course, people may find rhythm easier, but there's got to be other factors where it's been learned. Like, perhaps, Gavin, you were listening to loads of rock and roll, or like loads of like music, or being exposed to things in different ways. And then obviously you tried it and you found it quite easy. And that means that would have like sparked an instant interest for you. You'd be like, this is easy for me. I really enjoy this. I'm going to practice this. And then that spirals. Yeah. And, I've tried the drums. I find it quite difficult. But, I don't know. And I guess for composition, there are people who find it a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, it is learned. And now that I do it, as a career, there's not a day that goes by where I find it easy. I find it difficult every day. I have to work at it every day,
Dropping in another cliched saying, there's that whole, I don't know who said it, but the whole idea that bad musicians borrow, good musicians steal. Who was that? Some composer.
Is that not...
Stravinsky?
I think it was, said that.
I think that's so true, though, in the sense that I think what's going to always make you better at something is either watching other people do it, reading or researching about people doing it, listening to people doing it, trying to 100%. Literally just copy what other people do in your own voice to then try and make sense of other people's styles of music. And as you do that, I think that's when you start to see connections happening, because no one learned to, I don't know, run a marathon by going out one day and deciding to run a marathon. You have to build up to the point where you then do it yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Which I think is the main sort of.
And I think Gavin, for you saying like I can't do this. Like, maybe you do sit down at the piano and you try to write a symphony and you can't do it. That makes sense to me. But like, I've saw you write a drum groove. Like, I remember, and then Julian like added a tune or something. But maybe if you took that drum groove and you your first stages into it would need to be building up from what you know. Like, I'm going to write a really cool drum groove. I'm not going to think about the big picture. I'm just going to write a groove that I like. And then if you, I'm guarantee if you write a groove that you like, you'll be able to write a bass line you like. Then once you have a bass line, you have chords. So then you can fill those chords out. Once you have chords, you can think about a melody. Expecting yourself to sit down and write an amazing thing for orchestra or for a band. If you've not done it before and it's not instantly coming to you, you maybe need to, I'm not saying you, Gavin, but one maybe needs to take it back to what they know, whether that be you're a bassist writing a cool line, or if you're a guitarist finding some cool chords, you know.
Transcribing as well. Transcribe everything that you listen to that you like. There's a chord progression in one of Liszt's ballads, which seems like such an odd place to find something for. So like the kind of music that I've been writing recently is, I don't know what you would call it, but it's not classical per se, but like the chord, this small chord progression that lasts about 2 bars, I think is fantastic. And like I listened to it once, remembered it, forgot it, had to then find it on YouTube after about a year, you know, thinking that what was that chord progression I liked again? So digging through all of his music, found it, transcribed it, and then it now just appears in lots of different bits of music that are right, you know. And it's quite...
And also, in one of the pieces you were writing last summer, you were writing this piece, and then you're like, I don't know what to do for the next thing. And then we sat down and watched Wagner's Tristan and Isolde.
Yeah.
And there was 2 chords in it that you loved, and then that became the foundation for a whole piece, just 2 chords from a 4-hour opera that sparked something for you. And Tristan and Isolde might not spark, you know, everyone's imagination, but you can always find those things, you know.
So there's hope for me, you think?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. I just to add, you more or less took everything I was going to say out of my mouth. Like it all goes back to like going back to that idea of like I basically when you're born, you are more or less a blank slate, and it's all about the kind of like intellectual enrichment you get as a child. So like in my case, my dad, when I was really small, I was listening to like there was Bach playing in the house and lots of like really complex jazz and prog rock and things like that, on top of other music that was on the background. Like my mum likes Aha and the Beatles and, you know, Rolling Stones and all that kind of stuff. So, and there was just constantly music going in the house. So that definitely had an influence. But going back to the one thing that I have noticed is with learning, because I do a lot of private tuition, and with my instrumental students, I always get them to do, or I get them to try composition just to see how they like it. And some kids really, actually the majority of them really like it, but one thing that I've noticed 100% of the time is that especially with older pupils, so like I'm thinking, when by older I mean like 12, 13, there is a huge like confidence barrier thing happening, you know. So I'll tell them, go write a thing, and then they bring it and they're like, oh, I don't think it's very good, or, you know, whatever excuse. And I'm like, it's probably fine. And then usually what ends up happening is that they bring me something that's completely original and is interesting, and I'm like, actually no, this is a really good tune that you've written. And then, you know, and you basically just need to start somewhere.
I think that's really interesting, Julian, because the thing about instrumental tuition is generally speaking, you start it when you're young, you know, primary school. So when you're young, you don't have that awareness. Like, you'll go up on the school stage and play Twinkle Twinkle, like absolutely horrendously, but still think you're great. And that's exactly what you should feel. But people tend to start composition once they've learned like awareness and learned good, like heard good music. And then they try and write something like, that doesn't sound like the stuff I know, it's rubbish. And yeah, maybe it is rubbish, but that's just because you're just starting. Like, composition and songwriting doesn't start at the same time as instrumental tuition, and that's why I think people find it so hard to sort of catch up, you know? And sometimes you just need to like break down those barriers and break down those expectations. And in fact, I'm just looking on my desk here. I'm doing composition workshops this afternoon with S3 pupils. And that's obviously going to have such a range of abilities in that class that we have to take it back to a non-musical state. And I'm going to show you what I'm doing with them. So I made a graphic score. So I read a stanza of a poem and then tried to interpret it into a graphic. And I know this is a podcast, but it's basically just like pencil scribbled on a page.
Yeah.
But like
that's a good visual description.
Yeah. But you just
for the audio listeners.
You just have to do something. You know, yeah, it's such a hard thing. Like,
no, totally, yeah, 100%. You just need to do it. It's kind of I'm thinking back to I think it's Stephen King writes like an A4 page a day.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what it is. It's just you just does it. You know, and I think it's that approach can be very beneficial.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
just.
And I think
just write stuff.
I think that sometimes I'm guilty of this myself. You like sit down and you're like thinking like, what can I do to write something amazing? And sometimes you have to. Well, I've learned for myself anyway. You have to look for external inspiration, external influences. I was doing composition workshops with a singer, and she was talking about how she writes lyrics, and it's not what you think. She's not sitting down with a coffee and just beautiful lyrics are pouring out of her head. She reads articles and circles words that she likes, phrases that she likes from completely disparate articles, and then puts them together into something that makes sense. But you know, it's coming from something else. Like, no one is plucking amazing stuff. Well, some people are, but out of their head, like all the time.
Yeah, just out of thin air.
Like, no, yeah. For me, anyway.
Cool. So, when you get to a point in your songwriting abilities, you know, things, you start to get a wee bit more competent. You've written a good chunk of songs. There's something that Julian and I talk about sometimes is deliberately giving yourself limitations so that you create something a little bit more out there. So what's generally, just from the guests that you speak to, is there any sort of correlation between them all? Like, what's their method in actually coming up with a song? Does it come from something like, oh, we write it on piano, we write it on guitar, or we just sit with Sibelius open, or what limitation do people tend to give themselves? Like, what's the kind of thoughts on that?
I think it's probably not like the most convenient answer, but I think from who we've interviewed so far, everyone has their own sort of way of approaching the same thing. And I think a lot of the time, going back to what we've already mentioned, it's always about breaking down that barrier of where do I want to get to and where am I at the moment. I'm trying to think of examples of people.
Well, I mean,
a lovely example would be Martin Suckling.
Yeah, I was just going to mention
interviewing him.
Yeah.
And he was talking about his piece. What's the piece called again?
Release. The one.
Yeah. No.
Oh, there's 4 on the album. What are you talking about?
The first one.
Oh, The White Road.
The White Road. So the White Road. It's a lovely piece of music, and near the end, there's a sort of lullaby that just comes out of nowhere. The music's been very different up until that point, and we kind of asked him about that, and we're like, what was the sort of the inspiration to suddenly change the whole tone of the piece of music? And he said, I just had my daughter, and that was the whole thing. And he was like, I was singing lullabies every evening to my daughter to get her to go to sleep, and then it just sort of he kind of mentioned it as being not particularly conscious, but it just seeped into the music that he was writing and became this sort of tie that got him out of the piece, which was just it was lovely. Yeah, I
mean, in terms of starting points, again, Martin's a great example. He was writing a orchestral piece, and it's this total blank canvas thing where you've got like 20 minutes with the best symphony orchestra in the country. What the heck am I going to do? And the piece Release that I was mentioning there, he just said to himself, like, what would happen if you like threw a ball on the moon? And what would happen to the ball, and what would that sound like? And then you've instantly faced yourself with a problem. What does that sound like? I'll try that. And it might sound rubbish, but in his case, it worked well. Like just setting yourself that little silly challenge of what this
Well, that's the
sound like.
limitation, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's like, you've got to, like, you set yourself a set of parameters, and you know where you're operating. Once you know where you're operating, it's a lot easier because you've got frame of reference. If you don't have any limitations or any frame of reference, you can't really.
You end up getting suffocated by too much choice.
Yes,
definitely. Yeah, it's like for me anyway. I always try. I don't always succeed, but I always try and come up with the title first, and come up with the
interesting
what it's about first. And
it's similar to writers. Fiction writers do that. They come up with the name of the character first. A lot of people do that. Like Charles Dickens, he would, before even writing a plot, he had to get the character name first to try and. I think Tolkien did that as well. Because once the name's there, it's like, right, I've got something. Yeah,
and I also feel like if I come up with the title and I write it at the top of the Sibelius file and save it as X piece, I feel like it's more of a thing, and I have to commit to it rather than like draft one or untitled one. Like I feel much more invested in it already when I'm like, this is what it's about, and maybe I don't have the notes yet, but it ties you down a little bit. And also it means when you finish the piece and you've got 3 days to the deadline, you're not just sitting thinking of a title for 3 days. You've done that and trying to attach something arbitrary to it later, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah, it reminds me of a tune that I wrote ages and ages ago, where one of the limitations that I set, it can be so abstract as well. Like I just picked 3. I was like, the number 3 is going to be the limitation.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, well, what can I do with 3? So minor, like third intervals, minor third, major third intervals, like multiples of 3 for the time signature, making the chords move in those intervals as well. That was fun.
Yeah.
It's just another idea. I ended up doing that for my 3rd year. It was probably because I was in my 3rd year and I was just like, 3. Yeah.
I want to hear that.
I've got the score. I'll see if I can get the MIDI. It's pretty dumb. It's a pretty dumb piece of music. I like it though.
I think Julian might have a bit of a I don't know, vertigo moment, but the one of my limitations that I decided with the piece of music I wrote was putting 7, like a feel of 7 against a feel of 5 simultaneously, and having that as the start of the piece of music, which in theory works quite well, but in practicality is quite difficult to coordinate. But
oh my god!
But things like that do sometimes become interesting. Like I myself anyway, I found that quite a nice process to work through. Just how can you make that work and not sound like a mess? You know, it's quite nice to sort of try things like that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point actually. Maybe more prevalent in like the sort of classical world, but what am I trying to say here? Like, you have to have your music played to know if it works, and it's something younger composers, songwriters, etc. are particularly guilty of. Is they write something in Sibelius or whatever, and it sounds great, and then when it translates into a real live situation, it doesn't sound great, and you think, oh, it's just because the player mucked it up, or it's just because this, or it's just because that, and you'll learn so much more about the music you write when you hear it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that was one of the benefits of the course that I did. Was that we actually got to try songs out with actual musicians. So, like, you wrote the song, and then you actually got to try it out. And you're right, it makes a huge difference, and it's never, well, most of the time it's not the musicians. It's just, it's the music first that you need to look at, you know, to see what works and what doesn't. But yeah, you're right, 100%.
To bring this back to sort of more, because obviously most of our stuff is about like pop bands, rock bands, all that stuff. But there's nothing really different between I mean, music's music. It doesn't really matter what genre it is. Like if you're a songwriter for a rock band, you write the song and then you try it out with your band, and you know if there's bits in your song that aren't working, because when you play it in a group in a room, it might sound good in Guitar Pro, or Sibelius if you're that way inclined. It'll sound fine, but if you try it in a room and you're like, this isn't working, and people make suggestions, so like, that bridge is too long, or this and that. You can tell very quickly that, oh, this isn't working or whatever. So it's like the songwriting process does not stop once you finish writing the song. You have to actually go and try it out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I guess the difference with rock and pop and even like our band is you can rely on other people's expertise.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't need to write a bass line for Julian, because whatever I write will not be as good as what Julian can play. Equally, same with drums. So I guess with rock and pop and bands, it comes from a place of sort of play and jamming, and I guess that's what's different. But use that to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's more. I think it's because of the jazz thing. Because obviously rock has its roots in jazz, and jazz is more freeform. Because there's a lot more. You can make up stuff on the fly. Obviously, classical music is very rigid to the music. You get the odd passage where it's improvised, but it's quite rare. But like with the likes of the stuff we do, like the only thing that's set in stone is the chords and the tune. Everything else can the structure, obviously. Yeah. So because I mean, like I said, music's music. It still has to abide by the same laws a little bit. It's just done differently. It's framed differently. That's why you use Sibelius, because it helps you visualize what it's going to sound like when you take it to a band. You can, even though it's MIDI instruments and all that, but it gives you some sort of idea. That's why I have so much admiration for those old composers when all they had was a piano. It's mental. Like trying to hear what it's going to sound like on a flute or on a clarinet, or it's like, how do they? That's mental talent, crazy talent. I can't get my head around that.
I think though the skill that comes with being a composer, say back in the 1800s when all you had was a piano, is like trying to play something through in your head and imagine what it would sound like. And I suppose that like that kind of would you call it like an inner ear?
Yeah.
Trying to tap into that as much as possible, as well as using Sibelius and various sort of playback programs. Like I think sometimes just sitting and imagining how something's going to sound without listening to anything might be as useful as actually sitting and listening to some MIDI playback, because you'll get a sort of maybe a slightly clearer image of what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
I find it forces you to think about it a lot more.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I certainly rely on Sibelius far too much. Like I think of it like as an instrument. Like I play things into it and stuff. But I think it's okay, because the way that I use Sibelius is like I come up with an idea, and then there is still that element of play and experimenting where I'll just copy and paste something completely randomly to a place where I maybe couldn't play it or couldn't have imagined it. And it's, and I know people do that in Logic and, any sort of DAW, they just record their sort of main idea, and then without listening to it, they'll just make loads of random changes just to see how that works out. And then you can always undo them or take one of them, or, I think whether you're using Sibelius, whether you're using DAW, or whether you're playing it yourself, you should always have that element of play and experimenting.
Yeah, just throwing out noise.
Totally.
Just because if it's too clean, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago as well. About my stupid theory about linear versus non-linear. which is kind of it's a maths term. So it's like linear is, I can't remember the it's like continuous along a straight line, no deviation, whereas non-linear is random. It's like infinitely complicated. So an example of that would be like a digital clock versus an analog clock. You know, the digital clock is perfectly in time all the time. That's linear, whereas a battery operated or a clockwork clock is non-linear and it's analog and it's variable and it can go out of time. You have to constantly tune it and all this. And we were just talking about how human music is inherently non-linear because it comes from humans. It's not perfect, but we're using nowadays linear tools to record it. And I just think that makes no sense to me because and we're using like things like quantization and auto-tune and, you know, pitch correction and all these things. And it's taking all the humanness out of it. It's very prevalent in modern music, probably not in your domain like classical, because it's all. I mean, you don't quantize an orchestra. Imagine quantizing an orchestra, or pitch correct. Oh my god! Oh no!
I did try and pitch correct a piano just to see if it would work out of curiosity, and it is an unusual result that you get. Like, it sounds weird. Like, because my piano is like ever so slightly out of tune, as all pianos tend to be a little bit when they're in your house. And I put on a sort of odd, pitch correction, and it just sounded warbly and odd.
Yeah,
quite
it's fun. Yeah, we did a thing like that, Julian.
Yes, we got my sister to do a siren wail, basically, just like just that. And we selected a bunch of notes in this pitch corrector, and we were like, right, just pick out those notes in that, you know, and it's good fun playing with software like that. And
it made her sound like an arpeggiator. It was great.
It's made her sound like a randomized arpeggiator.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah. I suppose that's an example of using it for creative ends.
Yes.
So when you set out to write a tune, presuming it's not for someone and it's maybe just for yourself, do you have a genre in mind when you start, or do you just write and see what happens? What's the thoughts there?
I'll go first because I'll be quite quick, I think, because I don't really have anything in mind when I start per se. Like, I don't have a genre or a specific thing that I'm trying to achieve whenever I write anything. It tends to be a bit like, I mean, I don't write an awful lot of music, so when I do, it's a bit of a novelty in itself for myself, because I'm more of a performer than a writer, I would say. But I tend to just, as I say, it's more of a sort of process of collaging together things that I think would be kind of fun to do or fun to put together. And it's more or less just trial and error, but kind of guided trial and error by sort of seeing what I think would fit, and then if it does fit, I'll be dead over the moon, and if it doesn't fit, I'll just go back to the drawing board and see what happens. So, I mean, I don't know how as I say, I don't know how I describe anything that I've written. It's got sort of jazzy chords. Weirdish rhythms.
So it's guided by your taste more than anything else.
Yeah, I think have a soft spot for metric modulations.
I do.
To the point where I had to tell you to stop
using metric modulations. You've used too many
modulations are the best.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm sort of trained as a classical pianist, so I think my broad mindset comes from like chords that I've came across as a classical pianist, along with a little bit of like very, very incomplete jazz education. I never took it much further than university, and then like when I was at university and doing a couple of modules, but I've kind of read the odd thing, so that seeps in to everything that I write. And then my general love for just putting horrible changes of time signature, or I'm one of those people that you would call like one of those people that just is so guilty for falling for like a ridiculous rhythmic pattern or something like that. So yeah, that would be how I would always approach my writing generally.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think I sort of stretch across a few different musical genres. So before I start something, I'm normally always doing it for something, i.e. I'm writing for our band, or someone's asked me to write a piece for a choir. So if I'm writing for like the band, like that's obviously already got a genre in mind. But what I would go a step further and be like, I'm going to write a jig, or I'm going to write something with weird time signatures. And then once you start, it can always deviate. It can always end up, you know, a waltz. You know, like if you it can always mutate. But I think it's important to have an idea in mind of what you're trying to do. I think
allow yourself to not get stuck in a genre as well. That's something that's just...
But also, just ignore that and do whatever you want.
Yes. Yeah. Follow your just what you're used to.
Totally. Your tastes. Listen to loads of stuff. That's what I say anyway. That's how I overcome
so
that.
important.
Just
listen to everything.
Listen to everything. Yes.
That's probably my problem, actually, because I don't listen to anything.
I think it is, like,
probably my problem.
Totally.
I mean, like, it goes back. I think it was an episode ages ago that we did on bass. I basically just said, like, you know, don't limit yourself to just playing one style of, you know, bass or whatever. You don't have to be a funk bassist, or because I see a lot of people on Instagram anyway fall into that trap. You know, every Instagram bassist that I've seen is either like jazz fusion, like virtuoso, or just likes to slap at the bass, and you've got those two, and nobody else. You know, you don't get somebody being like, oh, there's this ska album I really like, and I've been playing because it's more about. Well, with Instagram anyway, it's more about showing off. Yeah. You know, it's like, look how fast and look how technically I can play. But back to the point, a good way to start, and it goes back to what Ben was saying about transcribing, just learn songs of all sorts of different genres, even if it's something that will take you, you think will take you 5 minutes to learn. Something like country music, you know. I used to really look down on country bass lines until you actually realize, oh, actually, like the consistency and the simplicity of it is really, really hard to achieve. You actually need to sort of think about it. You can't just mindlessly, you know, play the root and then the fifth and then the root again. Like, that's not country music. You know, there's more
more nuance
goes into that. But yeah, listen to loads of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I know for myself and for loads of composers, when they're starting out, they'll just listen to stuff. They'll just listen to loads and loads and loads of stuff and just write down what they liked, what they didn't like. I mean, I'm in the process of starting a new thing at the moment, and I'm really stuck. And I've been stuck for about 3 weeks, and it's a vocal octet, and I've just listened to vocal octets for 3 weeks and heard loads of really random stuff. I'm running out of vocal octets to listen to, actually.
You'll need to write a new one so you've got something to listen to. It's quite funny though, because like a good example of something that Aileen's done recently where it just became something that you'd listen to for a while was your Sonic Arts piece that you were writing, the last thing you were doing for your masters.
God!
And like you should hear it. It's phenomenal in a really ridiculous way. I hope you don't mind me saying that. It's the last thing I had to do for my masters, and it's Sonic Arts, which is like electroacoustic music. You know, the technology stuff. You know, which is not my cup of tea. And I stupidly took the module 2 years ago, and then because of COVID I couldn't get into the building to finish the module, so it's like hung over me for like 2 years to write this stupid like 3-minute electroacoustic thing, and I didn't know what to do because I had no interest in doing it whatsoever. Kind of going back to Gavin's things, I was like, oh god, it's this like annoying pass-fail module that I need to do. And then I just sat down and I was like, what have I been listening to that I really like at the moment? And I'd been listening to Ella Fitzgerald's like
the sort of crazy scat stuff that she does. And then I'd been listening to J-pop, and I'd been listening to one other thing I can't remember. And I was like, I'm just going to microtonal sort of hip hop stuff.
All the while you've had me practicing in another room,
with Rachmaninoff preludes in the background, and it was just like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put those 4 things together. Whether it works or not, we'll wait till we see the grade. No, I'm joking.
I want to listen to this now.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
And kind of going back to the whole like, oh, I can't do this. This is like I'm in my house. I knew I wanted it to have scat vocals. I don't have a scat vocalist here. Like, I'm just going to do it myself. And like, I don't sound good doing that, but I just went with it. And I was just like, this is what I have. Like, and kind of make something of it. Like, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous because I've multi-tracked myself like 24 times singing kind of bad. But, you know, if you own it, you know, it becomes a thing.
That's a phenomenon.
Want to listen to this now. I want to hear it. It sounds incredible.
I'll send it to you.
Please.
Layers are the secret. If you're like, I do this all the time. Like, backing vocals are always the last thing to record on the day, and you can get the whole band up, and like only one of them can sing, and the other lot are just. But see if you record enough layers, it eventually becomes in tune. It's like a football crowd.
Yeah,
it's weird.
I watched a TikTok because I'm a 26-year-old man that watches TikToks, and there was somebody that basically was like, I'm going to create a whole choir, and the video just starts with him just singing things really, really weirdly, like really nasally and like with all sorts of, but then you put it together and it's like this huge, like, you know, like 20 tracks or something, and it does sound like a choir because that's what a choir is. It's lots of different voices all coming together. It's fascinating.
I always really like watching I mean, he's a kind of love or hate kind of guy, but Jacob Collier's tracks, and he obviously has like 15 million tracks, but when you watch him multi-track vocals, it is really interesting because that's a kind of another kind of thing where he's really imagining sounds. And they're so intricate that you don't notice them, but when they're all piled on top, like, you watch him sing like a note 10 times, like fortissimo, a wee bit of breath, a wee bit of nasal, a wee bit of rasp, you know, and just layers that and layers that and layers that, and that's how you get a unique sound. You know, it's not just like, I want an F chord, so I'll sing F, A, C, and F. You know, it's thinking more about the colour and the timbre as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love him.
100%.
Cool. So, what's the plans for the podcast? Any things coming up in the pipeline?
We've got a couple. Well, we've got an episode that we're going to start editing, I think, over the next couple of days, which will get released on the last Wednesday in May.
Yeah. So we're just continuing with interviews at the moment. Just speaking to interesting folk.
We've got people who we'd like to interview, but no one kind of locked in just yet for the next few episodes. So we'll probably have more info.
If you write a tune soon, Gavin, you can come on and talk about it for an hour.
I'll show you how it's done. I wrote a tune. So if people want to find your stuff, where's the best place to look for it?
Our website, we are very proud of.
Yeah.
Well, come and find us on social media, but Ear to the Ground Scotland is our website.
eartothegroundscotland.com.
Yeah. And don't be confused by Ear to the Ground, which is a farming podcast, or Ear to the Ground
agriculture.
Scotland.
Which, I mean, we always say, like, it's an equally good use of the title Ear to the Ground. I couldn't think of anything better than agriculture as being...
I think there should be a collab.
Yeah.
A farming music composition collab.
And you know what? I think
100%.
once I work up the courage, I'm going to send them a little email and say, look, could we do a crossover? You know? We'll get on a composer and a farmer, and we'll just, you know, hash it out.
You know, a farmer who's a composer.
Yeah, that would be good, actually.
Gavin! There's room in the world for you!
Yep. I need to become a composer now. Yeah, I'll phone them up. Be like, I can do it. Why can't you? Yeah. Cool. Well,
Nice one.
Thanks for coming on. That was good.
No problemo.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was nice.
yeah. Songwriting and composing, and it's a bit of a weird mystery thing to me. I don't know how people do it.
Not now.
Not now.
Not
Not
now.
now.
Now you
I
know.
now know. So
No
yeah,
excuse.
I need to go and compose some stuff at some point. Try and learn how to do it. Yeah, I just need to get out of my own way. I think that's my problem. Just need, because I don't give myself chance enough to just let it happen.
Yeah,
I
totally.
just go, nah, it's rubbish.
Yeah.
Just go and do something else.
Yeah. People put up all sorts of weird imaginary obstacles in front of themselves, that they can easily sidestep,
Yep. Cool. So, as always, if you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review, pretty please, wherever you listen to it. And we're on all the social medias. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and levelupyourband.com. And share with your pals, share with your gran.
Yes.
They'll love it, I promise. Next week we have I've got an idea which I've forgotten about. It's great. Yeah. I had it in the top of my head and it's just escaped me. It doesn't matter. It's good, I promise. Come back. So yeah, if you want to see more interviews, let us know. And if anyone wants to come on, if anyone's listening going, oh, these guys are talking rubbish, like, I'm going to come on and tell them how to do it. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Please.
We'll have you on.
Yeah.
So, hope you all have a good week, and we'll see you all next time.